Good day everyone, Complaining Game here with the content that you've been waiting for, my 2 cents on Cemu 1.8.0 and Breath of the Wild. Now, before I even begin, there are a few important caveats that I need to mention. Cemu 1.8.0 was never advertised as being the ultimate fix for everything. It was never targeting compatibility, sound, or graphics. The main feature of 1.8.0 is the restructuring of the shader system. Even the developers themselves have said that over the past 3 weeks, changing the shader system has taken 90% of their development time. What that means is that any issues that you have with a specific game, you will probably still have in 1.8.0. If you know the Complaining Gamer by now because you follow my content, you know that my focus is always the reality of Cemu, not the fantasy. At this point, I know that some of you are a bit annoyed that Cemu has turned into a Breath of the Wild emulator as opposed to a Wii U emulator, but that's just the reality, people. It's the game that people want to play. So it's the one that we're going to talk about. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's jump right into it. Your old graphic packs and shader caches will not work, so the first thing we need to do is ditch them. In this situation, you have two options, and as is always recommended, you should back up everything that you've got. In fact, I would recommend keeping your 1.7.5 folder and just starting a brand new one with 1.8.0. It takes very little hard drive space to do that, and who knows, you might actually find that you have a better experience on 1.7.5 than 1.8.0, so it's always good to keep your old settings. So my advice, just to keep things simple, either you can do a direct copy of the whole folder and delete the necessary items, or just start a brand new one and copy over your important files such as saves. We are basically now on what people are calling V2 or version 2 graphic packs. Now, you don't need to sweat it in terms of typing out any text files. The good people over at GitHub with Slashy and XApp, they have already hooked up a bunch of the graphics packs that you're gonna need. So simply go over to the GitHub and download them. If you try to use your old graphic packs, all that's gonna happen is on screen it's just gonna say outdated and they are not gonna work. When it comes to the shader cache, you can delete it if you want to. I found that I didn't have to. As soon as I booted up the game in 1.8.0, my shader cache number went to 0 anyway, so it overwrites itself. The shader cache, of course, is the group of effects which build up the visuals on screen, so they are crucial, they are vital to the experience. Long story short, what did I first notice when I booted up the game in 1.8.0? Now remember, this is my personal experience, I cannot talk for every individual user. The good news is that Breath of the Wild Update 1.2.0 works in Cemu 1.8.0. Now the visuals that I saw on screen, I did notice a few changes. The image itself seemed a little bit softer and a little bit more washed out in terms of the colors with a slightly increased brightness. Now, one thing I should say is that although the visuals were slightly less crisp in my opinion, the overall fluidity of the image had severely increased and was much closer to the console version. The stuttering that you witness when building a shader cache still exists, of course, but I noticed that the frame freezing would recover much quicker compared to previous versions. When using the 1080 graphic pack in conjunction with Cemu Hook, I noticed that I was getting to a 30 FPS fairly quickly, which is something I've never even had before. So not only was it building the shader quickly, breaking the frames quickly, it was also getting rapidly to 30 FPS consistently. Now, as I say, people, hedging your bets and caveats are always important. There are no guarantees here, and we literally do need a lot more time before we can definitively say how good or not Cemu 1.8.0 is. Let me remind you, the focus of this development was the changes in the shader system. So previous issues involving sound or involving problems for AMD users still exist, but the big thing in Breath of the Wild, I'm not seeing disco dance central. The image is clean. We're not getting these strips of lights and flashes and particles. It's a clean image. So for me on Nvidia, the majority of the graphical glitches have gone. This has not been the case for some AMD users. Other than my experience, initial reports coming in from Reddit and Discord also seem quite positive. Now, another thing that I noticed, probably due to the double buffer VSync, is the frame rate locks which happen in steps. I noticed that depending on the graphic pack that you used, it really has a genuine impact now, whereas before it didn't seem to have quite the same impact. So for example, if I want to try and reach that consistent 30 FPS, I have to stick to the 1080p pack or below. If I go above that, then I kind of get locked down to 20. I didn't see too many people talking about that, but that was something that I noticed in my personal experience. The key word that we need to remember here is experimental and in development. Cemu is far from stable, and it's not going to be in what you would consider a stable condition for many months, maybe even many years. Now, for some strange reason, that brings out the white knights. I don't know why people feel the need to defend Cemu. They have nothing to do with it. I think Cemu is a very cool project. The developers are making absolute bank, so they definitely don't need defending. One of the consistently occurring complaints is that a lot of people are getting locked at 20 FPS. Now, I have had an absolute slew of very odd, very strange behavior within my Cemu, but I'm going to remain neutral for now and just sit on it and see how things develop. At the minute, in my opinion, some of the obvious issues involve slightly off lighting, a bit washed out colors, and Cemu of course does still crash. As I said before, I'm personally experiencing some very bizarre behavior, so I need to hold out my final judgment because I don't know if it's just happening to me or not. But for example, I was having an issue where every time I would teleport to Korok Forest, Cemu would consistently crash. Whether I had fence skip on or not, it made no difference. My current recommendation for those of you who have 1.8.0 right now, and for also those of you who will get it in the future, if you are suffering from a variety of errors, crashes, glitches, try reverting back to a very early version of Breath of the Wild, for example 1.1.0, and see if you still suffer the same crashes, because I actually have had experiences where going back to an older version without DLC, without updates, actually stops a lot of crashes for me. As previously mentioned, this version of Cemu is not about compatibility, so amiibos are still just one per day unless you use an external program. The graphical glitches after a cutscene using Cemu Hook still happen, where you have the rainbow road everywhere, the camera doesn't work, sound is erratic, and other glitches as well. I have already spent far too many hours trying to troubleshoot the plethora of issues I'm having with this at the minute, so for now I'm done and I'm bored. This is my conclusion. The changes to the shader system are excellent and show a lot of promise, but Cemu has a long way to go. As far as reduced RAM usage goes, I will need to get back to you on that because I need to build a much bigger cache of the world before I can truly comment. When it's good, I'll say it's good. When it sucks, I'll say it sucks. And I will be with you people every step of the way following its development. Remember people, the footage that you're watching now, I included fraps as a FPS counter top left. Whenever it drops, it's not due to Cemu performance, it's due to the shader cache building. What I can say is that what I noticed on my particular rig with the 1080 graphic pack was that in towns I was getting around 20 FPS, and in the open world it was between 20 to 30. I'm going to be hitting you daily with that 1.8.0 content, so hit that subscribe button. I've been the Complaining Gamer, and I will see you in the next video. Cemu 1.8.0 is out now for patrons, and it will be out on the 30th of May for the public. I'm going to leave you with a little bit of open world wandering. As a final note and a reminder, my friends, remember when you install a fresh Cemu folder, the buffer cache accuracy defaults to medium, so always remember to set that to low if you're having FPS problems. It sounds so basic, but sometimes the basics are what we forget.